All right. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone, depending on what part of the country you're in. If you're on the East Coast, good afternoon. If you're anywhere else, good morning. I'm so glad you're able to join us today. I've got one of the most amazing people with me today when it comes to your database. Really a database warrior and somebody who's been talking about database over and over and over pretty much for the last, 15 years, right, Steve? You've been trying to get people to realize how important their database is. So join me in welcoming my friend Steve Schleter, who is he's one of the first bold coaches out there, out in the field, and really just a person who wants to help everyone make the most of their database. So Steve, thank you so much for joining me today.
You got it. Now, I got to tell you, Scott, I just realized it. I almost put the same shirt on today.
Did you really? Can you imagine? I love a little paisley. So
Yeah, I mean, I almost put on the same shirt. So that would have been really interesting.
well, Steve, guys like us who are over 6 feet tall, there's pretty much one place that we can shop.
Yep.
So our choice of wardrobe is going to be very similar.
It's with all those things, right? I know you and I talking about Teslas a while back. We talked about we don't test drive cars, we test fit cars. So
exactly, you got to try it on.
You got to try it
on. Make sure it fits.
Well, let's talk database, man.
Yeah. So, Steve, before we get into that, I remember you sharing a story about when you were on the Shift book tour and you came to this realization that there were so many people out there, an even greater number than what NAR probably tells us of people who are farming their database and nurturing their database. You came to a big realization when you're on that book tour. And I'd like for you to share with us what it was that you took away from doing that.
You got it. Well, it was Tony DeCello and I. We were, this was September. By the way, the first outing of the Shift Book Tour was September 11th, 2008. And Tony DeCello and I were in Chicago. We were at the Marriott O'Hare. Man, I can still see it clearly today. We had 700 people in a room, Scott. And the afternoon session, we got to talking about database. We were going through all the shift tactics, and we got to talking about relationships in your database. And Tony DeCello asked a question to the audience. He said, how many of you by standing up are communicating, connecting with your database 28 to 33 times a year? Now, remember, MREA was 33 touch back then, right?
Yeah.
And so he even gave him a little grace, 28 to 33 times a year, any medium. You're calling them direct mail, email, however you're doing it, please stand. And Scott, 15% of the room stood up. And I know Tony and I looked at each other, and our our internal response was kind of, oh crap. It was an oh crapper. This is not good. And yet Tony took it a step further. He said, remain standing. And he said, of you guys that are standing, here's what I want to take this one step further. How many of you by remaining standing are, out of these 28 to 33 or more touches, 4 of them, at least 4, are face-to-face or over the phone? There's a real contact taking place through this. And Scott, it went from 15% to, catch this, 3%.
In a room of how many people?
Out of 700.
700 people.
So you can imagine 21 people out of 700.
Wow.
21 people out of 700 were having these critical conversations with their database. Now, here's the kicker with this, though. Tony and I didn't just test this in Chicago. We tested it room after room after room after room. And this 3% kept showing up. And now it wasn't just room after room either. It was year after year after year. And this is a chronic problem in our industry. In fact, it was the reason you would hear for years, I kind of consider myself the self-appointed database czar for Keller Williams. I'm going to keep singing from the mountaintops, folks, get it together. And Gary Keller, and Scott, you'll remember this. Gary Keller from the stage for years, he would say, you guys, why aren't you calling your database? He said, you're screwing up our industry if you're not talking to your people. You know, the reason the Zillows of the world and the realtor.coms of the world and other people want to get in your business is because you're not in your business. You know, you're off. I don't know. He goes, I don't know what you're doing. And here's what he said. And I'll say it today. I'm on his behalf. If you're not calling your database, get the hell out of the industry. You're screwing it up for everybody else.
Yeah.
You know, you're the one who's making it possible for companies like Zillow and all this to disrupt your industry. Because here's the deal. If they don't have a relationship with a professional, Scott, they'll go have a relationship with an app.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yet, Scott, I think I know you're a relationship guy. They would rather have a relationship with you than the app if they had a trusted relationship. Do you agree?
I 100% agree.
So here you go. So that was a little strong, and yet I say it because I wanted to kind of break your state around this idea of what this thing, my database is. And so here's something I want you to write down. In fact, can I share a story, Scott?
Please. That's why we invited you.
For a little fireside chat and a bedtime.
A little fireside chat about the database. You know,
well,
we want to get people engaged with it. And with such low inventory right now, if we're not the person having the conversations, they're looking for people to have the conversations with. And in all reality, they're looking at those apps and they're looking at the online stuff. And there's people out there that want to disrupt the industry. It could be a good time for them to do it.
Well, and they don't know what conversations to have, though, our folks out there. It becomes part of our job to help them have a conversation that maybe leads to a decision that is good for them. We can't make people do something they don't want to do. We can guide people to make decisions that are good for them. You know, this is called being the trusted advisor. But I want to share with you, a story that's going to highlight something that I feel is critical to share, building upon what we just talked about. By the way, I think you've got some of your leadership clients on here too, Scott.
Yes.
And here's what I want to say to leaders in your market centers. If you're not having conversations around connecting with the database at a high level with all your agents consistently, when I heard the 3% crisis, and Scott knows this, to me, that was being an operating principal and being an owner of market centers. To me, that was like being a principal of a school and knowing that my students, that only 3% were getting a passing grade in arithmetic. It's that kind of equivalency.
That's a really good way to look at it.
Yeah. And so, because that's why we call it a crisis. And this is a crisis of, are your people going to survive this market if they don't embrace that? Because I don't know, door knocking is a little challenging right now. Facebook and Apple are doing battle, and who knows what's going to happen with online Facebook leads. You've got, situations where do not call, where it's, that's really making cold calling and even FSBOs and expireds a challenge. What are you getting back to that's left? Opted in relationships. So here's the story. I'm driving down Texas 130. Of course, that's where we hit in Texas. We have the speed limit that's 85. So right, we can go, baby.
That's almost the Texas Motor Speedway.
That's it. And I'm going down 130 and I've got my 85 cruise control going, and the phone rings, and on my dashboard, it says Barbara DeLamo. And my first response is Barbara, who's Barbara? Can't place her, and yet she's in my contacts, so I must know her. So I hit the button on the dash, I take the call, and I go, well, hi, Barbara. What can I do for you? Again, not having a clue who Barbara is, but her name comes up on the dash.
You know her from somewhere.
Somewhere, right? And Barbara says to me, well, hi, Steve, it's Barbara in San Antonio. And I knew it was San Antonio because it was a 210 area code. And I go, well, hi, Barbara. She goes, well, hey, I was calling to wish you happy birthday. Now, Scott, it's July 9th, and my birthday is not till July 31st.
Yeah.
By the way,
write that down, everyone.
Yep. Put it in your database, right? I expect a lot of birthday greetings, right? And yet you might not call me then when you hear this. And I said, well, Barbara, thanks. I really appreciate it. Yet you're a little early. My birthday's not till the end of the month. She goes, I know. I wanted to be the first one. She goes, am I the first one? And I said, no, yeah, you sure are. And again, I don't have a clue who Barbara is. I can't place her. And then she says, "Hey, are you still coaching Bold?" I said, "Yeah, I sure am." And she said, "I took my first Bold from you in San Antonio, the very first one we did in 2009." And I'm going, okay, now I have a context for the relationship. I
Yep.
couldn't pick her out of a lineup, and yet I got context for the relationship. We go on, and she asked me about Bold, where I'd been doing it, what's new with Bold. We had that conversation. And then Scott, she asked me about, hey, you had that woman that sponsored one of our Bolds. She was your girlfriend. What was her name? And I said, Shelly. She goes, yeah, are you and Shelly still together? And I said, yeah, matter of fact, we are. And she goes, oh man, she was cool, really liked her. And in fact, I know you're originally from the San Antonio area. You'd even talked about maybe moving back to San Antonio. Did you ever do that? And I said, well, yeah, I've actually been back in San Antonio, gosh, 2.5, almost 3 years. And she goes, man, I'm a day late and a dollar short on that one, I guess. I said, well, of course, I'm a real estate agent, represented myself. And we continued the conversation. And she goes on to, what are you loving about San Antonio? We talked about that. She gave me some date night tips, and she asked about our future plans, any big plans coming up. We talked about a trip to Egypt and a trip to Russia. And we wrapped up the call, Scott. And I'm going, wow, that was a cool call. And I realized in that moment, Scott, that I had got forwarded.
Yes.
I got forwarded.
For those of you who don't know what that means, Steve, explain it really quick, please.
We got forward. It's an acronym. I know you need more acronyms than Keller Williams.
Yes.
And yet forward stands for family or friends. Write it down.
Mm-hmm.
Occupation, recreation, and dreams. Now, she asked me about Shelly, my family. She asked me about occupation, what's going on with Bold. She asked about what were we doing for fun in San Antonio, recreation. She asked about our future plans. We talked about, a couple of trips that we had planned, coming up. And I'm going, man, I got forwarded. How cool was that? Now, here's the kicker, Scott, that I want you to hear. If you had called me, folks, 1 minute before and asked who's a great referral person in San Antonio, it would have not been Barbara DeLamo. She wasn't on my radar. After that, she and I were in flow. We were connected. But here's the kicker. And this, whatever you're doing, if you're looking at a Facebook post, if you're looking at the chat, stop right now. Look at me right here. Scott, I went that night and I opened my email. Because what I realized on the dash, it said maybe Barbara DeLamo, which meant she wasn't necessarily in my contacts, but she was in some correspondence. And I pulled up my email and I put in the search Barbara DeLamo. And what I found is I had been getting an email from Barbara every 3 weeks for 7 years, people. 7 years.
Wow.
Now, Scott, when you think about that, what's that telling us?
Well, number one, unless we're intentionally connecting with them, the other stuff is just background noise. It's not really going to come to their attention.
It's not coming to their attention. You got it. Well, here's the kicker, though. 3 weeks later, I get another one of Barbara's regular emails. What do you think I did with it? Huh?
Did you open that one? I
opened that one, Scott. I actually opened it. I scrolled it, got to the bottom of it, and I'm going, that's what she looks like, right? And then it was a connection. Now I got another one 2 or 3 weeks later. I opened it. I didn't necessarily read them word for word, and yet think about what just happened. The fact that Barbara made a personal connection with me now made everything else she does with me work. Before that, she thought she was doing the right thing. She had a campaign going. She was emailing me. And the truth was she was a secret agent. She didn't even have any double O's in front of her. She was just an O, right? Yeah. She was a zero agent in my world. Now, here's something I want you to write down with this. Write this down. And it's something Susan Scott says from Fierce Conversations. The conversation is the relationship. Yes. The conversation is the relationship. So you can have all the greatest marketing in the world going, and yet if you're going to optimize your database, you've got to have conversations. And of course, in our program, Scott, Neverending Referrals, we talk about how do you utilize that forward model to have powerful conversations, and how do you even weave scripts, business conversations into a forward dialogue. You don't have to go through and ask somebody one question about every piece of this. And yet, I want to give you all a forward tip right now. Here's a forward tip, because as you're reaching out to have conversations with your database, Scott, I think we got to stop here for a second.
Yeah.
The first lesson is this: if you're going to have success with a database, what do you got to do?
You have to connect with the database intentionally. You can't let it
Intentionally.
be a passive action.
Yeah. And there's a lot of reasons we teach something in Neverending Referrals and in Bold that comes from our Neverending Referrals program called DTD2, that stands for Doing the Database 2. We don't have time to go into that today. And yet, what I would say is that, have a system for how you do this, how you create these connections. And as one reaches out to their database, you can have a business conversation. Scott, for me, when I started my real estate career, one of the biggest challenges with the database was I'm a high assertive. I'm a high D on the disc, right? And for me to call you and say, "Hey, how the kids doing? What's going on with the goldfish? Anything new with the dog?" And it's having those kind of conversations. Shoot me, I don't want to do it because it's not authentic.
Mhm.
And I had to learn later, Scott, that I could be the trusted advisor. In fact, I attended a conference where I heard that term, and it changed everything when it came to my connection with my database. When I realized I didn't have to be everybody's best friend, I could hold that place of trusted advisor. So I'm going to give you a couple of conversations here in a few minutes before we're done about how you might have conversations in this low inventory market with your database to uncover some listings.
Before we go there, Steve, I want to highlight one thing that I want to make sure everyone heard and takes away from this. So you did Bold in a Bold room with Barbara in 2009. And this conversation that took place on the toll road on the Texas Motor Speedway 130 took place 7 years later. So for those of you who have call reluctance due to the fact that it's been 2 years, 3 years, 6 years, 7 years, don't.
Yeah. And Scott, here's the thing. It actually had been 9 years.
9 years. Okay.
I only had archived emails going back 7. So I'm sure if I could go back 9, I would have found 2 more years of emails.
Wow.
Yeah.
So there's a big opportunity there. Don't let that prevent you from making the calls to connect with people. Because, like Steve said, she wasn't top of mind just because those emails were coming in. She became top of mind because she reached out to Steve and had a one-on-one conversation.
Yeah.
Good.
And guess what? I'm still talking about her. Jeez.
Exactly. I mean, 3 years later, she's now a superstar. And so, Steve, here's what my question is for you. We've got a low inventory market right now, and this is I've got the unique perspective of markets all across the country. It's not just something that I'm seeing in Texas or Florida or California. We're seeing it in Nebraska. We're seeing it in Montana. We're seeing it everywhere, and we have the unique perspective as real estate agents that the market is crazy hot right now, and the inventory is so low. And I think oftentimes we just automatically believe that because that's our perception, because that's what we see every single day, our database already knows.
Yeah.
So,
and that's not a real perception, right? Or they
exactly.
Here's the thing. We talk about being the trusted advisor. Gary calls it being a local real estate economist of choice. And by the way, as an economist or an advisor, your job is not to just report the market, it's to interpret what it means for your people. What actions might they take in light of the market? And it's to educate and guide, not just put information out. Scott, I don't know if I can screen share.
Yeah, you can. Actually, hold on, give me 1 second.
Oops.
You can screen share now.
Okay, let's do this. By the way, I put what I'm about to share, I put a link to it in the chat. Scott, if you want to download it and send it to Facebook land later, if you've got Facebook folks on
I
there.
will link it to scotttolar.com/live, and you'll be able to download it on the website when we are done with our call today.
Yeah. So this comes from Bold 2.0, and I want to give Denny Grimes a shout out on this. And he talks about something called shadow sellers. And, when it comes to shadow sellers, he said there's really 7 reasons why some people who maybe aren't in the market should get in the market. And I'm going to just quickly go through this. Now, this was an article that I penned for Scott. You're familiar with our Auto Connect program that we've got in Round Rock and Georgetown. And we have a newsletter that I penned this for, and it's also an email template that we're sending out to our associates that they can share with their database. And it's to inform 7 reasons sellers maybe should act now. And let's just go through them real quickly. We're not going to do a deep dive. You've got this. I think most of you will be able to interpret it, readily. But we've got an inventory shortage. We're not counting inventory in months anymore in most of our markets. Many places, it's days and weeks.
Yes.
We've got upward pressure on prices. In Austin Round Rock right now, the average winning contract, talked to one of our top agents yesterday, 33 contracts on one transaction went for 25% over list. We're seeing a pattern of about 22 to 26% above list price is the winning offer.
And there have been some that have gone as high as, on a $345,000 house, $171,000 above in Round Rock, Texas.
That's insanity, right?
Yeah.
And yet it's the market. So there's this inventory shortage, upward pressure on prices. Less competition means, somebody entering the market right now is going to benefit from the fact that they get to come in this auction-like atmosphere and get top dollar. So you have with this serious buyers, you see it, it's in the numbers. These people are serious about winning a home. Record low interest rates, helping prop up some affordability. And then, of course, here's the big one, window of opportunity. When markets shift, I'm going to read this one because this is going to lead to the conversations that you might have with your database. Window of opportunity. When markets shift, they often do so rapidly. We went into 2008, when we went into that Great Recession, no one expected the financial crisis or saw it coming. It just happened. It wasn't even gradually. It was just suddenly.
It happened on a Tuesday at noon.
Yeah, just pretty much that way.
Yeah.
And so when we think about this, and we think about conversations to have with our database, because the conversation is the relationship. And if we're going to show up as the trusted advisor, was having this conversation with Amy Gerard, one of our great agents in Round Rock, the other day. And Amy talked about the calls she was making to her database. And one of the hangups that we get into, guys, is behaviorally, and we talk about this in Neverending Referrals. And by the way, if you want to find out more about Neverending Referrals, please go to neverendingreferrals.com. It's a membership community. We have ongoing webinars. In fact, tomorrow's webinar is where we have an hour discussion basically on what we're talking about today. And Amy's talking about, she's struggling with the conversations with her database because she really wants to come from service, right? Not feel like she's taking or selling. And that's something a lot of us battle at times, right? We don't want to be salesy, and so, her coach, who happens to be a good friend of mine, they were having a chat and they took a script and they just tweaked it just a little bit. And she was using this market of the moment as a lead in for the conversation. And so rather than talking about this market and might they want to do something, she called up and she was modeling that she was very servant minded in how she served her clients. And so, Scott, can we just role play that, for example?
Let's do it.
Now I'm winging it a little bit because we didn't go through it word for word. And yet, I kind of done this a few times. I think we'll be okay.
Okay.
Ring, ring.
Hello.
Hey, can I speak to Scott? Scott, this is Scott?
Yeah, this is Scott.
Hey, Scott, Steve Schleter over at Keller Williams. How you doing, sir?
I'm great. How are you, Steve?
Oh, hey, I'm doing fantastic. And hey, how's the family? Everybody's doing okay with the COVID world right now?
We have dodged the bullet and haven't gotten it. Thank the Lord.
Oh, great to hear that. How about work? You guys, how's the job going? Working from home? What's going on there?
I love my family and I also love working. And I don't know that I always want to be working from home all the time.
So you're ready to get back in an office, is what I'm hearing, huh?
I kind of miss that atmosphere.
Yeah. Well, it allows you to turn it off. It's hard to turn it off when you're home, isn't it?
It is. Those
Yeah.
boundaries are a little more, they're less defined.
Yeah. Well, hey, let me ask you a question. Part of why I called today, Scott, was I was hoping you could help me. We are in an insane real estate market right now, and insane in a good way for a lot of folks. Maybe not as good for others, but what's going on is we've got an extreme inventory shortage of homes for sale, and I've got some buyers that I'm working with that we just have not been able to secure a home. And Scott, it's not uncommon in some cases to have 15, 20 or more offers on a good piece of real estate right now. I don't know if you're aware of that.
I was not aware of that.
Yeah. Well, and what it means is prices are getting bid up, and I've got some buyers that I'm working with that I'm thinking the only way I'm going to get them in a house right now without this crazy competitive thing, hoping to win an offer, is maybe finding something that's off market right now, and I can connect them. Is there anybody that's even, I mean, if they could like earn crazy money on their house right now, that would be thinking about, you know, possibly making a move or selling, and maybe I can connect these folks?
Well, Steve, I would always be willing to do it if the price was right.
Well, this might be the time, Scott. I mean, the price is, it's brighter than we've ever seen it. And Scott, let me ask you, if you guys sold, where would you be going next?
Well, that's my concern is based upon what you told me. It might be hard to find the next place to go.
Well, and here's the crazy part of that, Scott. We're able to manage a lot of that because of the market being what it is. I've got people doing lease backs for quite a few months. The you're able to kind of dictate the terms today, and that's usually not the case. And sounds like you might need a home office, is what it really sounds like.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I tell you what, it sounds like maybe you and I ought to have strike up a meeting about this, and get your wife on, and maybe I can give y'all an update and see if there's a path forward for you on this. Would you be up for that?
That wouldn't hurt to try. Wouldn't hurt to see what we could do.
Yeah. So right there, we've got an opportunity that we've created. And by the way, there's something we teach called the Ford sandwich. Before I let Scott go, I'd say, Scott, I got to ask you, what's the first thing you and the family are looking forward to doing when we get past this crazy COVID lockdowns?
Yeah.
And Scott's going to say whatever he says, and we wrap up on a personal note. And all this makes this very conversational. Now, Scott, here's another point. Let's say you said, well, Steve, nobody comes to mind right now that I could think of, and said, well, then I might come back and I might say, well, Scott, let me ask you, what are your longer term plans for your home? I mean, if you were to look out 2 years or more, do you see any kind of changes in y'all's future as far as your home?
Yeah.
And he may say, I don't think so. I think till the kids, get graduated from high school, I think we're home sweet home. And I say, well, that's great. Well, just if you hear anybody, man, I really want to connect these buyers with a home, and we can still get them top dollar without, having to go through having people through their home and, all the craziness. If you hear of anybody, please let me know. And by the way, especially if anybody's got a problem house, this is the kind of market where, if somebody's got a problem house, backs to a highway, backs to railroad tracks, or people are buying anything that's available right now for top dollar. So
Yeah.
just keep that in mind. So
Steve,
Scott, let's debrief this.
one thing that I also want to add into that conversation you're having, if you get to the point where they say, we're going to be here for the long haul, one of the places that you may also pivot there is into a interest rate conversation, and
Yes.
how now may be an amazing time for them to refinance, because so many of because the prices of homes are going up. It could be an amazing time for them to not only reduce their interest rate, but even reduce their overall payment, because if they didn't put 20% down before, the amount that it appraises for now may make up the difference for that. And now all of a sudden they're lower interest rate, they're not paying mortgage insurance, and it's just a win-win-win all the way around. And they're going to bring that back to who that helped them do that.
Yeah, you get to be the hero in a lot of ways here, Scott, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, and here's what I would say at the end of this, and that is, I don't know if I put that in there right. So I was typing while I was talking. Guys, check us out on neverendingreferrals.com. You know, one of the things that we do is we focus on the market of the moment, you know, every month. And we're really clear on what are the messages that work, what creates connection. I want to give them one last bonus tip here, Scott.
Let's hear it.
Because I think people get a little intimidated about having forward conversations right now with people, because it's like, if it's like when I asked you about work, how's work going? If I'm up in Montana and I know you are a welder on a pipeline, I probably don't want to ask that, right?
Yeah.
And yet, I'm going to ask it. And one of the things I want you to do when you ask forward questions, be prepared, maybe get some go-to questions, and be prepared for the worst thing they might say or the best thing they might say. If I'm prepared for somebody that says, well, you know, I got laid off, and I'm prepared for that, and I'd say, oh, Scott, man, and this is why my tone was empathetic when I asked him. So, hey, how's work going? Everything okay there? And you know, and yeah, we're working from home. The empathy, if I go, hey, how's work? You know, and then he has to go to a downer, it's going to feel weird for him. If I say, so how's the job? He says, man, I got laid off. I go, oh, Scott, man, I'm sorry to hear that. And well, let me ask you this: have you put a resume together yet? And he says, yeah, sure have. I said, hey, would you do me a favor and send it to me? I mean, I've got a great network of folks, and I'll keep my ear to the grindstone, and maybe I can help you get connected. Can't promise, but I'll do everything I can. And so, Scott, let me ask you, what's the best
Write
next
that down. Write that down.
Mm-hmm. And then I'm going to ask you a follow-up question, Scott. I'm going to say, so Scott, what's the right next job for Scott Tolar? And I'm going to put you, you know, I'm going to have you leave this positively, right?
Yep.
And then I'm going to transition to why I called, you know. And if I'm asking family questions, they might say something like, I just lost my dad 10 days ago to COVID. And whatever you deem appropriate, if you want to do a prayer with them, if you just want to, you know, be prepared for the worst that can happen, the best that can happen, and then whatever happens, you're going to be okay with. And yet, here's why forward works. And I'm going to leave you with this one. Forward works. And the reason Barbara created that connection and created that flow is because forward represents our highest values.
Yeah.
Our family, our work, our fun, you know, our dreams. And so when you have these kind of conversations with your database folks, you become memorable. You know, you become connected, and you create a flow that makes everything else work. And Scott, any last thoughts?
Well, Steve, these are the conversations that are more important than ever, not just from a real estate perspective, yet from a hope perspective, because we're taking people into a place where they can talk about the things that they love and they enjoy. And, you know, we don't know what's going on the other side of that phone. And the fact that we had the courage to pick it up may make the difference in their life by simply having somebody that they know cares about them enough to reach out and say hello.
You know, and this is not the time to be a smile and dial pounder, right? This is the time, you know, our friend John Maxwell,
yeah,
he says, walk slowly through the room.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a walk slowly through the room time. Doesn't mean and by the way, this phone call with Barbara, for example, 6 minutes. Most of these calls following this model are going to be 6-7 minutes tops.
Yeah.
And people yearning for connection today. So reach out, folks.
Yeah. Well, Steve, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. I really, really appreciate it. Next week, we will not have a call because of family reunion. I also want to encourage y'all to visit neverendingreferrals.com. It's spelled just like it sounds, neverendingreferrals.com. And then because we won't have a call next week due to family reunion, the following week, we're actually going to do a call at 12 Central Standard Time. And that is going to be on, let me pull up my screen and share it with you really quick. That's going to be on finding investment opportunities in a low inventory market. Investment and a low inventory, those are two things that people don't often think go together. And MAPS leadership coach Matt Teeter and Brian Martin are going to walk us through the conversations to have and the ways that we can be looking for those opportunities, because opportunity is all around us. It's just the way that we have to uniquely pivot in order to find the opportunities we're looking for. So Steve, once again, thank you for being with us today and sharing value. I appreciate y'all, and I will see you on February 24th at noon. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.